In this episode, I talk with Betten, former surgical trauma nurse, who went from working in the ICU unit to working one-on-one in the energetic healing field. We chat about why she made the transition from hospitals to working with everyone from football players to teen girls. She shares about how her body fell apart with yoga and a style of movement that she discovered to help put it back together, as well as what she learned during her pregnancy. We talk about methods like body talk, the Franklin method, and flower essences. Karen describes how our emotions can get locked into our tissues and offers a practice to release them from our bodies. I've had sessions with Karen, and I'm always surprised at how she can pinpoint the bullseye of a specific emotional pattern that's lodged in the tiniest of anatomy, and her knowledge of anatomy is mind-boggling. Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to this week's episode of the Flowerlounge Podcast. I'm here with Betten. She is a certified nurse practitioner. She worked as a surgical trauma nurse in the ICU, and then life took her on an interesting journey, and now she's actually working more in the energetic realms with methods like body talk, Franklin method, and flower essences. She does one-on-one sessions and classes and workshops in New York City and New York State. Thank you, Karen, for being with us.
Thank you. Such an honor to be a part of your fabulous podcast.
So, closing your eyes and going back to a time in your childhood when you played around flowers or plants or trees, see if you can identify a favorite, see what you were up to at the time, and then decide what 3 words you would use to describe the personality of your favorite flower or botanical. And then whenever you're ready, open your eyes and tell us what you were thinking of, what you're up to, your favorite, and your 3 words.
So my favorite flower, the one there was, I think they were called lilies of the valley, but I'm not sure. They had these little bells. And where I grew up, we had a motorhome that sat in our driveway and blocked this tiny little strip of foliage that we had on, we lived near the beach, so there wasn't a whole lot of land and a whole lot of trees, really no trees. And when the lilies of the valley would bloom, I would smell them and then have to go around to the other side of the motorhome to see and admire them. And I absolutely love them. So I would say the qualities would be vibrant, but sensual, right? Like my senses would be alerted and I would go searching. And then what comes in is powerful.
So the way that you bring your greatest gifts into the world is in a vibrant way, sensual, sensory alerting, and powerful.
What? That's cool.
So I think that listeners will find it really interesting how you got from nurse and surgical trauma ICU to where you're at right now.
Yeah. I had 2 pretty powerful points in my life that started to steer me in a different direction. Well, you could probably even add 3. And one is when I was a surgical trauma nurse, we were at the University of Penn, which is really a top trauma center. But we were one of, we had the helicopters that would come in. It was just like the TV shows. So we were dealing with the sickest of the sick, from gunshot wounds to car accidents to falling off of houses to whatever it was. And there was a real team approach that involved intuition. We didn't speak about it. We didn't talk about it, but it was very clearly used to drive the practices that we engaged with someone, on such a precipice of life and death that was in front of us on a regular basis. So it really left an imprint. And when I decided to get my master's at Penn, I always thought that I would just come back and work there because I love the community. I love the teamwork and I love the connections with the clients. But lo and behold, life always has little turns and twists. And I fell in love with my now husband and we moved to New York. So that wasn't going to happen because, nurses can get jobs anywhere. So I moved on and worked at Columbia Presbyterian with a colorectal surgeon. And one of the things I realized was this growing awareness of the link of the state of mind and the emotional state of someone and their digestive system, which came first, the issues that we're having on a physical level or the emotional state. But the nurses, we would speak about it because we would have a lot of people in with IBS and different, of course, they would be coming to us for surgery, and there, of course, there's a lot of stress and anxiety around having GI issues, gastrointestinal issues. So I really started to question and want to explore different ways other than, medicine and surgery to support my patients. And with the sort of demands of my job, there was no time to do that. And next thing I knew, I found myself pregnant, which then led to this awareness that there were all these amazing things happening in my own body that could have a medical explanation, but started to grow a deep awareness or a sense that it was more than just the physical, meaning if I changed my diet, then there was evidence to show, right, that maybe I wouldn't be having preterm contractions like I was having. And I started to really be willing, because I had, this new growth, to explore these areas that I believed I didn't have time for before. And I learned all sorts of things through the internet, the Bradley method, and I learned all these different ways of changing my current experience, whether I was having contractions, whether I was feeling stressed out, whether I was feeling tired, with techniques that were not physically oriented whatsoever. Boom. So
like visualization or breathing or.
Yeah. And even like making sure I had less sugar in my diet, more meat in my diet, which would then weirdly change my state of mind. I wasn't really even doing imagery or even meditation at that point. I was nowhere near being able to sit still long enough to do meditation. It was just really because even back then, diet wasn't necessary. We're talking like 2000. Diet wasn't necessarily a go-to respected avenue for creating change in the physical body. It was like this, people who knew about the Bradley method, they found out about how protein intake could change things. But something as simple as that to be so powerful. And I changed the way I was eating and the way I was approaching my day. And, the contractions that had started at 28 weeks started to go away. What?
Wow.
And started to really just put more attention and care into my body, which then helped me realize prior to that, I had really been giving that away to someone else, right? I had believed that I needed an expert because I wasn't necessarily, even as a nurse practitioner, I didn't feel qualified to make decisions necessarily that had value about my own body. And, over the course of the last 18 years, it has become my mission in life to deepen people's awareness that their connection to their body, their relationship with their body is integral to what they're experiencing. And taking the time to get to know that more deeply is the most powerful way to create the change that you are desiring in your own life. And so I hadn't known this. And even as I started to develop it step by step, it took a lot of years for me to become aware of how much power I had been giving away. First it would be to medicine, then it was to alternative practitioners, right? Then I believe my energy medicine healer knew everything and I didn't know anything, like to come to a realization, like, wait a minute, like actually quantum physics is saying that I'm participating in creating my life. Whoa.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Responsibility of all that.
Yeah. So, right. And so that could be seen as wow, this is exciting. I can participate in changing it if I'm the one participating in creating it. But simultaneously, that doesn't mean you have to go it alone and you don't, engage experts or whoever you're drawn to explore, but you engage them and then see if they feel aligned for you or not. See if what they're offering you gets you excited, or if what they're offering you kind of sense and feel that that's not truly for you. And strange as it may be, I've had incredible successes in my own life, in my children's lives, and in my clients' lives of just deepening our ability to be aware of our own power to create change by engaging practices that help us know ourselves better.
What are some of the practices that you most often go to today to do that?
Yeah. Well, a couple things that have, for a while I was very sort of regimented in how, I tried pretty strict diets, to then moving into my experience with your own flower essences. The beauty of flower essences for me is knowing from the work that Bruce Lipton has done that, our thoughts impact our chemistry. So in the beginning, right? So if you have a thought, your biochemical makeup will change based on what that thought is. And we know a little bit about that, right? If you think about a loved one getting in a car accident or something like that, your heart will start to race. You have a physical change, right? So the practice of using your flower essences 5 times a day and just reading, and creating this environment where you're amplifying something as simple as soft heart, wholehearted presence, and fearless love, like happens to be on the Fearless Compassion bottle that's in front of me. And take a breath as I spray it with the intention that those aspects of myself are amplified. Boy, that can really change the way, in my own experience, I look at anything. And maybe that to-do list that was, becoming a burden suddenly changes, and I move forward to the thing that lights me up. And I would say flower essences for me have been one of the most powerful redirections to honoring that in my life. And, when you meet someone who's lit up and who has put their time into who they really are, you feel lit up too. And you don't even have to exchange words, right? You just, you're near them and you feel more at ease. And that is what flower essences have done for me. So I would say the number one thing is I am always, and I like the word playing with flower essences always, I'm playing with a different one. I usually focus on one a month and then I play with different ones. I've also have found that movement is so important in my life. If I'm not moving my body, my thoughts will reflect that and they will repeat themselves over and over and over again, like a record that just keeps skipping. So movement is really important, but I also got to a point where the things that I used to do for movement weren't working for my body anymore. Like,
what did you used to do?
I used to do a lot of yoga. I did 5 years. I did an incredible amount of yoga. It was my soul. And then my body started to fall apart the more I did yoga.
Interesting. In what way?
I started to have issues in my lower back. It literally felt like I was ripping my glutes off of the top of my femur head. Didn't know what my femur head was back then. I do now know. And then tension and discomfort in my neck and shoulders. And of course, it doesn't mean there was anything wrong with yoga, and there is nothing wrong with yoga, but the unconscious approach, I didn't know what I was bringing to the yoga mat, but I did know what I was experiencing after the yoga mat that was then telling me I couldn't keep doing it anymore. I needed to find a new way, which can be really challenging, right? Like when you think you found something that is perfect for you and really supports you for 5 years, and then your body says, I don't want that anymore. And your mind says, oh yes, it's the best thing out there. Everybody knows yoga is great for you, right? Whoa, well then what am I going to do? Lo and behold, a very strange answer was put in my lap. And I started to study something called the Franklin method, which basically can be applied to any movement. It's not really about the movement, but it's what is the focus that you're bringing to the movement? And boy, did that start to deepen my connection to my own body mind. Having awareness of how I unconsciously hold my body when I'm not noticing, and how those habits were then brought to any exercise technique that I was doing. So then I get better at my habits, but you don't know you're getting better at your habits if you don't know you have habits, right?
Right.
And then with that, I started to notice, just this practice helps change the nervous system, right? Instead of walking around thinking about how painful my knees are, when I think about the way my femur naturally rotates opposite the way my hip bone rotates, one, I'm focusing on the incredible masterpiece that my body is. And two, I found that, holy moly, my focus got better. Like I was able to retain, I'm always studying Ayurvedic practices, Chinese medicine practices, quantum physics, and my retention got that much better. So there's movement, then there's movement combined with practiced focus techniques. And then there's a deep awareness of when I'm in the fight or flight stress response and when I'm not. And there you can have choice to do something about it, right? If you're not even aware that you're stressed out and running around like a chicken with your head cut off, which is basically the state of most people in Manhattan if you've ever walked down the street. I think Franklin says something along the lines of like, who likes to put a little effort and get a very little bit of, what did I say? Who knows? Who likes to put a lot of effort and get a little bit of a result, right? Like no one. But if you've ever watched people walk down the street in New York, like the tension in their body and the stress that they're using to walk down the street, there's clearly more effort being put forward than necessary in order to walk down that street, right? Whoa. But if you're not aware of that, which most of those people are not, right? You're not even aware that you're expending 10 times the energy necessary just to walk down the street. So then you go in an exercise class and you're going to keep up those patterns.
Oof. Right. Because how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah. So then that helped me get even more out of everything, right? Then the spray of a flower essence, like I'm able to fully take that into my whole body, mind, and just change it, right? It's not that the sugar honey iced tea doesn't happen in my life anymore, which at one time was my goal, right? I should have no challenges. I should have no conflict. Everything should just flow easily. It's more about, almost getting excited about those challenges to see what my creative energy that's uses my mind, but doesn't rely on my mind solely as a source of resolution can do. And it's that funny thing, you spray a flower essence and many times you meet this awesome person because you're in a different place after that, and suddenly you see that rose that reminds you, or you see that butterfly, or you become aware of the supports that are around you in a way that you never have before, because I might have been so busy doing. Which, should I give a little plug? Because I will say what I loved about I went on Katie's Costa Rica retreat, and one of the most hilarious moments was, some of the other retreats that were there, it was like, what are you doing today? And it was like all these lists of things. In our retreat, it was being. I got such a kick out of that. I was like, my whole life, I've waited to be on a retreat where the entire goal was to be, and look at that, here I am.
Such a freeing feeling, isn't it?
It is. Things are magnetized to you that are for you rather than the things you think you should be doing because that's the way the world has always done it, or other people do it, which is a fine way to be too. I just prefer that other place and continue to seek out that experience. And then weirdly finding things like someone walks in with a sprained ankle and we do a little session on them and we do flower essences on them, and they literally can't believe that after an hour they can walk fine. Dramatic changes in a sprained ankle that make no sense. And so I would say one of the greatest changes in my life is an embracing of the mystery. Do I need to know why that worked? Or can I let that power of the mystery, the power of the unknown, be a great big source of support to me and open my clients to its power in their own lives?
It's funny because you mentioned Costa Rica, and I'm thinking of the day that we had a 100% silent day, and we're soaking in the tide pools, and there, everyone is together, but there's no pressure to talk. And so you just have this kind of wide open, vast feeling, and you just kind of end up starting to feel as big as the ocean and as big as the sky. And then suddenly, like, some wild horses come trotting down the beach, and you're like, but where do wild horses come from? Like, this is so bizarre, right? And then you see suddenly, like, you see at the corner of your eye, hundreds, and maybe you didn't see them before, but suddenly you can see hundreds of these little emerald green crabs coming out of the rock right next to you, making little noises and eating. And there's like hundreds of them. You're like, how did I not see those hundreds of crabs before? And then you just keep kind of peeling off the layers of the moment to moment reality. And yeah, like, why get stuck in thinking about where those horses came, or do they have enough to eat, or who feeds them at night, or how do the crabs survive for 12 hours when the water tide comes in? And like, who cares? It's just amazing. Why is the sky blue? It's gorgeous, right?
Yeah. It's like more of that. How do you bottle that? So people say, what do I do? Oh, it's a mystery.
But when someone comes in and they have a sprained ankle, besides the flower essences, what methods are you using with them?
So the first method, energy medicine method that I was trained in, is called body talk. And it was really, my first body talk session was one of those moments of feeling the incredible weight of the world lifted off my shoulders. And I had just had an enjoyable experience while I was lying on a massage table. What? Like, I didn't talk about my life history. I didn't take any pills. I didn't, undergo surgery, at least to my awareness, while I was lying on that table. And I felt this huge, huge release of the stress, and so body talk is such a vast array of techniques and approaches to an individual that walks in. But the bottom line is, it's recognizing that rather than the Cartesian model, which is kind of like what most of regular medicine uses, which is that this part is, if you got a problem with your heart, you see the cardiologist fixes your heart, and then you move back along. So it's kind of like a clock. If there's a part of the clock that's broken down, you fix that part, you put it back, and everything works fine. This is much more like dynamic systems theory, or just recognizing that everything is affecting everything. If your heart's having an issue, it could be its relationship to your lungs, right? Which might be because you unconsciously are habitually in the pattern of holding yourself in this sort of curled over spine flex position, which might actually be because you're still carrying around some beliefs that, you are not good enough because of maybe some experiences that you had as a child. Perhaps your parents split up or something happened, some memories that you believed reflected your lack of worth. And then that influences the way you hold your posture, and your posture influences the communication exchange between your lung and heart, which then creates, sensations that you either are short of breath, or that your heart is having palpitations, or who knows what it might be. And pretty amazing that by revealing or highlighting that experience to someone, if it's a priority, can do worlds to just change how the lungs relate to the heart, how the lungs relate to the spine, how that relates to the brain, which relates to the outlook, which then suddenly creates this change.
Right. Okay. So it's like when you do meditation and you put your awareness somewhere, whatever you're looking at changes, or like if you're looking at a small child, the moment that the child recognizes you're looking at them, their behavior shifts just a little bit, or any one of
like
us, right? Not just
the power of observation is sort of the seed that initiates the change.
So when you're doing body talk, you're telling people sort of like a root cause of why something is out of balance, and that attention or understanding kind of unlocks the knot.
Yeah, it's like we're recognizing that any symptom that the body is experiencing doesn't have a singular cause, that it's multi-layered and it's multifactorial. But if we can address the priorities, that have sort of created like the last straw that shifted that client into that symptomatic state, wow, some pretty magical things can happen. And then we use techniques like tapping, where it's just like essentially we're tapping the head, we tap the heart, and we tap the abdomen to store these communication changes in those neurological networks of the body that then transmit those communications to the rest of the body, so that the body becomes the whole body, the whole community of the person becomes aware of the shifted communication pattern between the lungs and the heart, or the heart and the liver, or the liver and the mind, right? Whatever that person's, patterns are, because we're all so unique. We're all so individual. We all might, 3 people might be experiencing a cold, but the factors and influences that lead to those symptoms are individual to each person.
What are some of the causes that you can think of? Just rattle off 5 or 6 of just kind of odd.
Well, like for example, knee pain, right? Okay. Just even in Chinese medicine alone can be related to fears and willpower and drive, like trying to drive yourself through life experience to overcome fears, right? You bring those fears to light, the person gets a chance to observe them, see how, fear of failure, and they get a chance to kind of take a look at that and see, is that a belief that is unconsciously driving your activities in your daily life? It creates tension because I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail. That creates a totally different experience than someone who's showing up for an experience going, hey, we'll just see what happens here. I'm doing it because I'm drawn to do it. And that can lead to a breakdown in the knees, which can lead to pain, which is really what ended up with me. I said, that's what led me into a lot of things, is I had a lot of pain in my knees. So anger, right? Anger can put tense in the body, right? So if we have unprocessed anger, in Chinese medicine, the organs that deal with anger are the liver and the gallbladder. I remember joking, John Veltheim would talk about how people who had their gallbladders taken out, which was a procedure I participated in a lot, then would take their gallstones, which are essentially in an energetic balls of anger, and sit them proudly on their bedside, so they could still sleep with their anger.
Oh my God. Wild.
But not knowing that's what they're doing, right? They're just saying, hey, these are my gallstones. And like, there'd be a practice of like, it made me laugh because, that's the interrelationships of our bodies and our minds and the experiences that we attract do make sense. Kidney stones can be balled up fear. But if we can bring those fears to light, if we can bring them to the observation of the client so that they can see them while we're balancing out perhaps the balance of the left and right brain, right? So we can use our intellectual thinking as a framework to access our wisdom and our knowing. Wow, that's a fun integrated place to take a look at your fears. Versus if you're just in your mind and you're trying to intellectually figure out your fears, it can be very limiting. But if you merge that with your wisdom and your knowing, which is what you were saying happens with, breathing, meditating, for us, tapping out the cortices where we're balancing the brain, you can see those beliefs from a different place and open up to moving them through.
And have you combined flower essences with body talk to where if you're able to identify a particular pattern, you can match it with a flower essence to sort of kind of continually give the psyche that information?
Yeah, I think from my body talk training and my true belief that everyone is an individual, there is that, right? Like you can see, oh, this person, a sense of peace or inner peace would be a really powerful technique for them.
Or is it gone after you give them the session? Like if you have, let's say, an issue in the ankles and you've just
Yeah.
kind of gotten in there and you've identified for this person, it's a pattern of such and such and such. After you do the tapping, is that just like it and it's been solved for some people, or do other people need that sort of like continually like
Yeah.
drip of
Yeah.
making sure to solidify the new pattern?
Yeah. I mean, of course, both scenarios happen. I find with the flower essences, it's more of an intuitive feel. And you can almost like I'll get a sense of what flower essence is aligned, because that's really how body talk works. It's like, it's very, very binary. Is this aligned or is this not aligned? And you create a interface, much like biofeedback or applied kinesiology, to get a yes or no. And I will apply that to particular meridians. For a lot of people, it'll come up their kidney meridian. But of course, it varies. The spleen meridian was one it was, and then you see people come in waveforms. But you'll see a very visceral reaction when you spray an essence that's aligned for a person. They'll be like, "Whoa, what was that?" And you'll get people to say that's more than just an essential oil. Like a lot of people are familiar with essential oils and they've used them, but they'll feel the sort of extra energetic sort of power that comes from the flower essences, which you and I know because the essences impact the mind and the consciousness. And so then, that, you sense that one's aligned, but I kind of follow the client, and I will recommend an essence, but then I'll also, if they feel drawn to another one, there's so many ways to peel the onion. I follow that too. So weirdly, coming from medicine, I very much believe in the individual path of any session that leads to what's perfect for that client, because I truly follow their lead. And that emanates out of recognizing their unique imprint is so important to what their needs are.
That's quite a shift from the model that you were operating in before, where you were talking about giving your power away to someone else. And now you've essentially gotten out of that model and have created this other model so that other people are able to feel the connection with themselves and you allow them to take the lead. It's pretty revolutionary.
And it's funny, if that's really been evolving for me, and I would say the last 6 months in a deep, deep way. And that my sort of passion and purpose is to remind or even reflect, like hold a space for people to find that own space on their own, even when they're with me. And they'll come in thinking they need stuff fixed, but somehow, just because of, I think, my own commitment to recognizing my continual struggle with thinking I need to be fixed, creates this container where other people, without me having to really do much, become aware of that being a limitation that they have the power to move through too. And why not, and so then flower essences create this beautiful path to play with that. What flower essence do you feel drawn to use today? And then I try to invite people, if they feel drawn, to commit to it for a month. Wouldn't it be fun to spend a month, exploring fearless speech, authentic expression, and conviction 5 times a day, and just get curious to see how your life changes? And, you get these like, I can't believe my knee pain has gone away. Like, how did you do that? And you're like, no, I didn't do it. Like, I can't do this without your participation. We're creating this together. And those are your priorities, which you were clearly aware of. And that's why you were drawn to that essence. So for me, the flower essences have been such a key pathway to make people more aware of this potential power that lies within their own landscape. That, along with, when you change people's thoughts, right? You think about how the body is actually designed to work, and then suddenly your pain goes away. And you're like, what? And I'm like, I know. It's crazy. It's not what I was told in the beginning either. Nor was it what I believed.
Yeah, somebody actually was talking about that in the kitchen in my house last night. They were saying that there's a fifth question that's been added to, like when you see someone, like let's say you go to the ER or you see a doctor, there's this series of like 4 or 5 questions that they go through. You would know more about this than I would, but they've added a fifth one that's automatically overlaid to everyone in every situation, which is, what is your pain level 0 to 10? Even if the patient hasn't said anything about anything hurting.
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting given the level of prescriptions for painkillers and, how that can be problematic on so many levels.
It makes me think about, when I was entering my practice for nurse practitioner, this would be, what was that, like 97, 98. I was gifted the opportunity to work with a couple of doctors that were close to retirement. And I was so blown away by their practice. They would go in and they would just ask, one in particular, his name was Dr. Kenneth Ford. He was just this beautiful man. And he would just ask 3 questions. And you could see he put his hand on their belly. We dealt with a lot of people with abdominal pain and, the workup for that. And he would know what was going on with them immediately. Like that's another thing that left an imprint in my mind. Now, we worked at Columbia Presbyterian, so the residents would do all the necessary workup to satisfy the legal, issues, but he knew, and he would schedule the surgery, or he would say, no, they can go home. And he just knew.
That's a real.
And I was so blown away, compared to the newer surgeons coming in. It was like a litany of tests, and it was all analytical, and it was very intellectual, and they'd be firing the patients with 10,000 questions. And that's another thing that has stayed with me. You think those little points. So I was 22 at the time, that has stayed with me, that how funny I'm coming back to that full circle, the power of listening, the power of giving an opportunity for the client to reflect their own truth just by you creating the container that recognizes the wisdom in that.
And the power of listening to the body. It reminds me of being in Singapore with this traditional Chinese medicine doctor, and she didn't speak much English. So, at a certain point, it's just like, here's my pulses and here's my tongue. Just give me what I need. And she was just phenomenally talented. And you think, like, rather than holding open a container that has an expectation for you to feel pain, even if you don't, you're holding open this like really sky-like container to just like actually listen to the body, which sounds like what that beautiful genius intuitive doctor was doing, is just sort of like asking the body, well, what's happening in there? And it also sounds like the work that you do with Body Talk, you're essentially asking people's bodies, what's happening in there?
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I mean, I love it. I've worked with like some football players, right? Like my son is in high school, and, you connect them into an emotion that they're feeling in the chest, and you get them to be creative about it. This is one of the techniques in Body Talk called emotional release. And you say, if fear had a color, what color would it be? Which gets us out of our thinking mind, right? Most of us don't want to feel, I don't want to feel that fear. Don't make me feel that fear, right? Like I've had clients say that to me early on in my practice. Don't make me feel that fear. Because I didn't mean to. That was my own. Now it's like, okay, but if it had a color, what would it be? And if it had a texture, is fear to you? Is it bumpy? Is it smooth? Is it rough? Is it silky? Is it, jagged? What is it like? And you watch these football players, and they'll be like, it's jagged and it's purple and it's got these crazy shapes. Like, okay, now invite that to just sort of collapse in with it. And I'm going to help you because it feels like it's here in your chest. And you just sort of invite them to watch it collapse down to the size of a walnut. And then with the breath, you move it down to the diaphragm. And I can't tell you how many football players go, oh, whoa, I could feel that. It really happened. It's really gone. How did you do that? And it's like, no, actually you did it, right? You turned it into a color. You turned it into a shape. Yeah, and it moves through. So releasing fear is not an intellectual process. It can be a creative process, but a creative process that's connected to your unique way that you create that fear or you experience that fear. You know, do you experience it as sharp? Do you experience it as smooth, as colorful? So, wow. And what a difference, you know. I bet if I had them monitored, you'd see their heart rate go down immediately. You'd see their blood pressure drop. You'd see, you know, like, our infinite potential to change is so exciting. The science supports it, and we have all these amazing tools. And I just get more and more excited to keep applying them in different ways. One of my favorite things to do is just to work at, you know, like a little health fair or something like that. And I like to do the essences there because you don't need to talk much to people. You just spray it and people go, what is that?
That's so
That's your power, you know, when you're aligned for something that is amplifying who you really are, you feel it.
It's interesting because you have such a fun approach, right? You have such a fun approach to healing. It's like colorful and creative and potential and possibility. And it's not like dragging you through the pain. It's like, it's actually fun.
Yeah. And that is so, you know, the piece is like just taking a look at, okay, what is it about this that we see it as a burden? You know, I see it as a burden. The community sees it as a burden. Well, what if we didn't see it as a burden? What if we saw it as happening for us? You know, what if this was an invitation? What would be the, you know, to look at something we don't see as possible? That to me is fun. That's exciting, you know.
Describe a situation either from one of your clients or, you know, something you've seen recently happening a lot with your clients or classes, some like issue that people are experiencing and how you can translate that to an invitation.
Anxiety. I see a lot of adolescent girls that are sort of see it as a bad thing. And I always remember that in Chinese medicine, you know, anxiety is dealt mostly with the stomach and the spleen. And I used to remember, what's the benefit of anxiety? Remind me again, because I have no idea. And anxiety was a thing that got me into, you know, doing what I do in seeking out how to move that through in my life. But then I could never remember again. Tell me why that's a benefit. It took me years to get that through.
What is it? What's the answer?
Well, it's really right. Like you're gleaning the essence out of life. So the stomach, what does the stomach do? It like absorbs the food that you're ready to take in, and it passes on what you're not. So our life experiences are doing the same thing. You know, we're gleaning the essence out of the experience. What do we want to hold on to, and what do we want to let go of? And we can't necessarily put a time frame on that. Everybody, it's going to be individual. And worry is that state where we haven't quite, you know, fully glean the essence out of an experience. And so I'll invite, you know, girls to see that, you know, perhaps there's an experience that you need that you haven't engaged yet, that this energy or this emotion is having you pause in your, you know, to-do list and your must list and my lacrosse practice and my violin lesson and my schoolwork and all these things, to invite you to take a look at it. And maybe you're actually creating it because it benefits you, because it offers you the opportunity to bring that in. Now, some people won't be able to take that sort of intellectual jargon right away. So another way to do it would be, you know, and that's going to be different for everyone. Turn it into a color. What color is anxiety to you? Boy, most people will tap into that immediately. Now, the real intellectuals will not be like, what? It's not a color. What color should it be? Well, if you don't know, you can make it up, right? Like, no, I need to know what's right, right? Like, and I laugh at that because I was there. Like, I was in that place. That's me too, you know, like, no, there must be a right or wrong to this. I mean, I want to make sure I get it right. And I go, no, this is actually only right for you. Okay, well then I guess purple, I don't know, you know, and then that funny moment of like, we'll give it a texture. Now giving it a texture might be easier for someone than giving it a color, and giving it a shape might be easier. But then, you know, even the, you know, holding your hands over someone, right? Touch can be so powerful. So just putting my hands on someone's belly when they're feeling worry, and just, you know, imagining that well, I don't really imagine anything. I just sort of feel the space. And then people say, wow, what are you doing with your hand? What's happening? And like the real answer is, I don't know. Like, I don't have an intellectual explanation for what's happening, but you feel something changing. Isn't that great? Guess what? I don't have any powers that you don't have. I'm not magical. We're creating this here together, and it wouldn't be happening if you weren't participating in it. I don't know. That's kind of what I do, is we make it up as we go. For each person, recognizing that they're an individual imprint, just like a snowflake. And the factors that lead to their experience of anxiety are totally different than someone else's. For someone else's, we might need to visit a fetal memory from their mothers, a stress that their mother had when they were in the womb. And you'll watch it, people feel such a resonance to it. And then they'll go home and they'll be like, ask their mom. And their mom's like, oh my gosh, you're right. Yes, your dad, this and that happened to them. And they can't believe it came up. I can't believe it came up either, right? I'm from medicine. I'm like, oh, what is that? I don't know. And then you start to open to the magic of mystery and open to that the world is not just physical, right? Which science has done too, right? And I had to study quantum physics. And people say, well, what are you? I'm whatever I'm seeking in that moment. I've had to study quantum physics and really understand that the reality is we are just energy. And how we observe ourselves influences how we show up. Holy moly, you're that powerful. Yes, you are.
Another topic that would be of interest, I think, to the listeners is teeth, right? Everybody's got to go to the dentist. If you could just a couple words on if your methods help, any experiences you've had in your family, cavities, gums, stuff.
Wow. I feel like I'm coming out as I share some of these experiences. Yeah, well, we all have a lot of beliefs about teeth. What's possible, what's not possible. And I worked with a Shaolin Kung Fu grandmaster named Cam Yuen for years. Ooh, he was amazing. He's an astrophysicist, of course, right? Because you have to have some sort of degree somewhere along the line. But he's actually the mastermind behind the David Carradine Kung Fu series in the 1970s. Anyway, I had a toothache. I was told I had a cavity in it. And I was going to a holistic dentist because I thought they were better and this, that, and the other thing. And I did a session with Cam Yuen because I was really drawn to work with the man, the knowledge he had. He's in his 70s. He's incredibly physically fit. And he's an impressive man. He's done a lot of amazing things. So I did a session with him. He's like, okay, it's gone, but you need to go to another dentist for them to see that it's not there. Now, this was years ago. And I was kind of like, what? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, well, for whatever it's worth, when a dentist looks at an x-ray, their beliefs influence how they see it. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, I didn't come into this work without doubting it the whole way, mind you. I questioned it. I doubted. I was like, no way, you're all crazy. This is nutty. So I waited some time because I didn't know of another holistic dentist. I didn't know where I was going to go. And up to that point in my life, I had not really ever had any cavities. I started going to this holistic dentist and he kept finding cavity after cavity after cavity after cavity. And I was like, okay, hang on, pause out. I've made 38 years without them. Why are we finding one after another right now? But I had that history to have me then question it, right? Not everybody has that. Most people have a history where they just believe cavities are a necessary experience in life. Anyway, lo and behold, I went to another dentist and there was no cavity to be found there whatsoever.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, dun, dun, dun. And then I want to explain one other. I had a toothache, a really painful toothache. And I worked with a practitioner. I don't even remember who it was. I did a body talk session. And it came up that I had fears of being better than my husband. Now, mind you, this was at a time in my life where I was sort of exploring, moving away from being a full-time stay-at-home mom and exploring taking these new techniques that I had learned into the world, representing them, putting my name and my initials behind them. And I was sort of stopped in my tracks, at that's a ridiculous belief. And then I sort of sat with it and I was like, although if I image it, that doesn't really, this funny little thing right there, the tooth shifted, it moved, and I never had another piece of pain with it. And I, again, went to the dentist after that, expecting to have it. I had had a cavity, again, diagnosed in there. I went back to the dentist, never to be seen, never to be talked about again. No cavity in there. So, I am not saying this is how everybody should treat it, but these are the experiences that I've had in my life that make you go, there's more to everything. My son had lots of cavities, particularly 4 big ones that, we were told you had to have those filled, you had to have them taken out. Because of these experiences, I did not. I was told that the infection would influence the adult teeth and the adult teeth would be ruined. Anyway, lo and behold, we did energy work on him and all his teeth came in absolutely fine, no issues whatsoever. And he's 16 years old and doesn't have any cavities. Meanwhile, at one time, he had a mouthful of them when he was a baby. But we were looking at the underlying influences through the energy medicine, which takes into account everyone, right? Energy medicine isn't just the communication in the body, it's the communications between your body and your mother's body and your father's body and your siblings and your grandparents and your future generations. And, people are like, what future generations? It's like, well, we all have hopes and dreams for the future. They impact what we're experiencing right now, right? We have views of how we saw what happened to us in the past, which influences what we project can be possible in the future. Well, you move around how you see and experience in the past, suddenly your future looks different. Suddenly your whole body chemistry feels different. The stress releases, the jammed up, trapezius muscle suddenly feels released because you don't feel that you have to be on edge based on some unprocessed trauma that happened to you in the past.
Anticipating.
Yeah. Now, for some people that, might be related to tension in the jaw, which cuts down nutrition to the teeth, which influences cavities.
Whoa.
These are the experiences I attracted in my own life. Yeah.
So, quick question that arose in my mind as you were talking. If you're working on children, say that are 4 years old, let's say, on their teeth or their something or other, it works for them too, because you're just speaking to their higher self, or the part of them that understands everything, right?
Can be pretty amazing, right? You can just tap out their cortices, a technique that is available on their website, and their whole demeanor will change. I tell stories about my own children, but my youngest daughter, when she was 5, was like playing on one of those big balls and ran into head butted into a wall on a ball and started to scream and crazy. And this was kind of at the beginning. And we were down in Florida around, all of my husband's family who we'll still no one knows what I do, right? Like, cause it can't be explained in one word, like, what do you do? Well, I'm a walking mystery, like I don't know what I do. It's not any recognizable word, which at one time in my life I wasn't comfortable with that. Now I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the potential that lies in mystery. Anyway, I tapped out her cortices. She stopped crying immediately and moved on and started playing as if nothing happened. And everybody was like, oh my God, what did you just do to her? And it's like, well, I just balanced her brain, so the logical thinking that might have been, sensing that everybody was upset could merge with her intuitive wisdom so that she could move through the experience and just carry on. I mean, she literally stopped in her tracks, looked around, and then ran off calling the other cousins, come wait for me, I want to come with you, kind of thing. Now, that doesn't happen to everybody, like that's the funny thing is what I learned was when people didn't experience responses to this, that even though I was interpreting it as a failure, as I started to work through my own relationship with failure, I could hold space for them letting in the idea that they were having the exact experience that was necessary for their unique makeup and their unique nature.
What you
right?
want them to have.
Yeah, versus what, I see through my own projections and expectations and triggers and ideas of what they need, rather than allowing what is truly aligned for them to arise, and having no need for it to satisfy, me being a good practitioner, or me being good at what I do, or, me having some sort of power, but rather just showing up for the mystery of it and inviting that opportunity that whatever it is happening for both of us.
Okay, so we're coming to the end. So this is probably like one of the last questions, but I want to ask anything that words of wisdom you can elucidate the difference between naming something. It feels true to the person. It's like, ding, it resonates. And because their attention is there, they're able to allow it to have space and shift and move and change, versus naming something and somebody fixating and hanging on to it, and that becoming a story that repeats itself over and over and over. Do you see either one happening? And anything you have to say about that? I was just talking to this fabulous practitioner who, next time you come to Phoenix, you should meet him. And his name is Tim Hawkins, and he's the most incredible, physical therapist. And he was saying how he and his wife were having these integration circles for people who had done psychedelic experiences. What he was noticing was that the more people would engage with these types of pretty heavy duty plant experiences, the more fixated they would become in their stories, to the point that he was just like, I don't want to do these circles anymore, because people are just getting so they think they're integrating it into their life, but they're just getting more and more fixed and fixed and fixed and fixed in their story. And they got to go do the plants now every week, because it's the only relief they get from their story. And from his experience, he was just seeing it get more and more and more and more fixed and solid. So any words of wisdom you can offer to those two responses and make it happen?
It's so interesting, because I've had a couple clients recently who've had some real expressions of obsessive compulsive disorder, right? Which is, and I had this awareness that she was literally reflecting back to me how I was seeing society, or how I was seeing, she was just expressing the thoughts that I often have, that society, we have these thoughts that I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this, and we're beholden to them. And we're all experiencing it on some level if we don't have the tools to get us out of it, and even if you're not, you throw on the TV and it's telling you all of these things that you have to worry. Well, if that's reflecting an unprocessed worry in you, then it's going to bother you. Right. So interesting, like you say with the flower essences, you're attracted to the experiences that amplify exactly what you're ready to amplify in your life. So I would say that, the people attracted to those plants are attracting the experience that is shedding light on exactly what they need to have a deeper awareness about, that the plant is just amplifying it on some level and bringing out an operating system that is unconsciously driving their behavior all the time.
So how does your method ensure that by, for example, bringing light to a particular story rather than it getting more fixed and fixed and fixed and fixed, like when you hear stories about people saying well, I've been in therapy for 30 years, but I'm still addicted to this, and I'm still feeling like a victim from my family,
And
is naming.
Absolutely. And what is the difference between the two? And of course, I can't, there's no guarantees that what arises in a session won't kickstart an experience for that person, of a nature of that has sort of obsessive thinking around it. However, I think, oh boy, I think one, the nature of the sessions, because we're participating and integrating all aspects of the person, right? And recognizing that we're more than just our mind, we're more than just our body, we're more than just our spirit. We have, and the words we use for that, sometimes I like the word multidimensional. What does it exactly mean? I can't tell you, other than there's other, influences that contribute to how we show up in any life experience. And when we take a step back and recognize that, I love to use somebody, Dr. Manjir Lawton, Samantha Lawton has this black hole theory that, above time and space, there is a plan that could never be understood by the mind that's functioning on this earth plane, that's so physically oriented. And that in some level, those obsessive thoughts are exactly part of the plan to move through the challenges or the experiences that that person is desiring to have in this life. Like for, even a person who finds themselves participating in a group where a lot of obsessive thoughts are happening, right? We're taught as practitioners, well, then look at yourself and see, how that's showing up in your own life. Does it bother you that if people have obsessive thoughts? Okay, what is the root of that? It could be ancestral, it could be religious, it could be lots of different avenues. Yeah, so I think what I'm really sort of saying is, it's never a mistake. It's never because that experience is wrong, at least what I've learned. Even like,
okay, I had a thought. What I think is the difference between your method and, for example, what I was talking about before, is that this is what I believe to be the difference, is you hold a space of continually deepening into your own connection with yourself and your own creative potential to heal yourself. Whereas I think what's happening in these integration circles that he was talking about, or like deep psychedelic work, is still relinquishing your power to that freaking psychedelic plant, that it's going to fix you. That is something external from you is going to fix you, and you need it more and more to be fixed because there's something wrong with you. And I think that's the fundamental difference, is you are continually holding a space that a person needs nothing outside of themselves except for their own creative potential and connection with themselves to heal on multiplicity of levels. Does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. With the additional point that it might not necessarily even be, for some people, it might not even be the plant, but the awareness that they pick up other people's energies really quickly in a space and become
affected.
Yeah. And unclear about what's theirs and what's someone else's. And perhaps that's the experience that they are wanting to get more insight in. Like what I would garner to say is that each person was participating in that for a different experience. Even though you might say they were all having the same thing, they were all having obsessive thoughts, they were thinking, they're all garnering different awarenesses out of that experience. And some will be, I rely on plants. Some will be, I can't live without community. It's that funny thing, which then all comes down to fear, what we think we need in order to be happy. And my growing experiences keep telling me that it's nothing in the external world. It's an inside job, where another person will take that plant and have this incredible insight, never take it again. Right. And I'm sure there's documented cases of that happening. But what drove those circles to gather in that moment is individual to each person and leads to the experiences that they are creating that is ultimately happening for them. At least that's how I have more and more started to explain things. And it's not because someone made them do it, or, that the plan is bad, or that I just don't believe. And remember, I got into this. I was a surgical trauma ICU nurse. So I was seeing the worst of the worst every day. We had a wedding when I was 22 in our ICU of a young man who had fallen off a roof and was paralyzed from the chest down, and he was engaged. And so they decided to speed up the wedding and have it. The emotions that went through all of that in that moment, you're drawn to seek explanations outside of the regular whoops that just happened. So, of course, my explanations for things are going to be colored by me seeing a lot of tragedy, traumas at a very, very young age, and me being an integral part of participating in helping those patients and their families and their extended families, quote unquote, heal.
Okay, so last words of wisdom for the listeners, based on your body of work, based on anything that's arising for you in this moment, anything you want to share.
It's like my nemesis trying to narrow it down to one little message other than, you are beautiful. And even if the story you're telling yourself, anything that says that there's something wrong with you, is just a story. And committing to exploring whatever you feel drawn to sort of dig in that story and see the one that says that you are perfect just as you are, as an equally powerful theme of your life, can do wonders to change your biochemistry, to change your outlook, to change who and what shows up in your life, and to create magic. And what's magic, right? Something that we can't explain by our current understanding of how things work. Yeah, right? Magic's not some elusive thing that a guy does on stage. Magic is basically something that we don't understand, but yet there is incredible potential in that experience for all of us.
I love it. For more Karen, for one-on-one sessions, for virtual work, for in-person work, for classes and workshops, visit Karen Betten, Betten.com. She has a beautiful website, and you can experience body talk and flower essence recommendations and a whole slew of things virtually as well as in person, right?
Yeah. And I do a lot of those mind-body workshops. We look at the heart and we look at the lungs and we look at movement as a way to enhance the mind-body connection to create changes in everything.
Love it. Thank you so much for being with us.
Katie, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to The Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.